High school was a time of both excitement and trepidation, and I had my fair share of memorable experiences. However, one incident during my sophomore year still haunts me to this day. It all began when I was assigned to locker 313. It was an old, battered locker, tucked away in a dimly lit corridor of the school. Rumors had always swirled about that locker, tales of strange happenings and unexplained phenomena. As the weeks went by, I started to notice odd things. My books and belongings would mysteriously rearrange themselves overnight, and I often heard faint whispers emanating from the direction of locker 313. At first, I dismissed it as mere coincidence or my overactive imagination. One evening, as I was retrieving my history textbook, I heard a voice, a chilling, whispery voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Help me," it pleaded. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. The voice seemed to be coming from locker 313. My heart raced as I approached the locker, my fingers trembling as I turned the combination lock. The locker creaked open, revealing a torn and tattered diary. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I began to read. The diary belonged to a student named Sarah who had used locker 313 years ago. Her entries spoke of eerie occurrences, of whispers and shadows that plagued her. As I read on, it became clear that Sarah had been tormented by a malevolent presence, one that had driven her to madness. I closed the diary, my mind racing. Could it be that Sarah's spirit still lingered within the locker, reaching out for help from beyond the grave? The whispers grew louder, more insistent. I knew I had to free Sarah's spirit from the torment that bound her. With the help of a friend, we performed a ritual to release her soul. As we chanted the incantation, a blinding light enveloped locker 313, and the whispers grew into a cacophony of voices. I could feel Sarah's presence beside me, her gratitude overwhelming. And then, with a final, violent force, the locker door slammed shut, and the hallway fell silent. Locker 313 was finally empty, and Sarah's spirit was at peace. I couldn't help but wonder how many other students had been drawn into the locker's cursed grasp, how many souls were still trapped within its darkness. High school can be a place of camaraderie and learning, but it can also be a breeding ground for urban legends and ghost stories. One such legend revolved around room 203, an abandoned classroom that had been off limits for as long as anyone could remember. The room was said to be haunted by the ghost of a former student, Emily, who had met a tragic end there. The story went that Emily had been a brilliant student, always at the top of her class. But as the pressures of high school mounted, she had succumbed to the stress and had taken her own life in room 203. Despite the warnings, my friends and I couldn't resist the urge to explore the room. Armed with flashlights, we entered the abandoned classroom one evening, our hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. The air inside was heavy with the scent of dust and decay, and the silence was oppressive. We ventured deeper into the room, our footsteps echoing in the empty space. And then, as we stood in the center of the room, the atmosphere changed. The air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding settled over us. I could hear faint whispers, like the soft rustling of leaves, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. As I shone my flashlight around the room, I saw her, a young girl in a tattered school uniform, her dark hair hanging loose around her face. She stood at the front of the classroom, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My friends and I exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. We knew we had to find out who she was and why she was trapped in room 203. We approached the girl, our hearts racing, and asked, "Who are you?" She didn't respond, but her gaze seemed to pierce through us, filling us with a chilling sense of dread. I knew then that we had to uncover the truth. We began to research the school's history, and what we found sent a chill down our spines. Emily had indeed been a brilliant student, but the pressures of high school had driven her to despair. She had taken her own life in room 203, leaving behind a legacy of tragedy. We knew we had to free Emily's spirit from the torment that bound her. With the help of a local medium, we conducted a séance in the classroom. As we chanted the incantation, a blinding light enveloped the room, and the whispers grew into a haunting chorus. I could feel Emily's presence beside me, her gratitude overwhelming. And then, with a final surge of energy, the room fell silent, and we knew that room 203 was finally empty, and Emily's spirit was at peace. High school football games were always a highlight of the school year, and our mascot, a grinning jester, was a symbol of pride and spirit. But during my senior year, the mascot took on a sinister life of its own. It all began when strange occurrences started happening during games. The mascot would appear in the stands, its grinning face twisted into a malevolent grin. It would stand silently, watching the game with an unsettling intensity. As the weeks went by, the mascot's appearances became more frequent and more disturbing. It would wander the halls of the school, its presence filling the air with an oppressive sense of dread. One night, after a particularly intense game, I decided to investigate the mascot's strange behavior. Armed with a flashlight, I entered the school's basement, where the costumes were stored. The basement was a dimly lit labyrinth of storage rooms and old equipment. As I made my way through the maze, I could hear faint whispers, like the soft rustling of fabric. And then, in the darkness, I saw it, the mascot costume, hanging on a rack. Its grinning face seemed to mock me, and I could feel a malevolent energy emanating from it. I reached out to touch the costume, but as soon as my fingers made contact, a blinding light enveloped me, and I felt a surge of pain and anger. I saw visions, horrifying, nightmarish visions of the mascot's past. It had once been worn by a student who had been consumed by jealousy and rage. The student had used the costume to commit unspeakable acts of cruelty, spreading fear and chaos throughout the school. I tried to break free, to escape the visions, but the costume held me captive, forcing me to witness the horrors of its past. And then, with a final, violent force, the visions stopped, and I found myself standing in the basement, alone. The mascot costume lay on the floor, its malevolence vanquished. As I left the basement, I couldn't help but wonder how many other students had been affected by the malevolent mascot, how many souls were still trapped within its cursed fabric.